I've been nagging you for some time to do an introduction to parenting, and your response has always been, there are enough podcasts, there is enough material out there, who needs one more sort of...
Indeed, crowded marketplace, huge, saturated.
But my view is that there isn't a really good general introduction, I don't think. So what I'm hoping to do with this film is to give anyone watching this a general idea of what parenting is. Parenting classes are, rather.
Okay.
Because actually parenting is what you are investigating in your classes, correct?
Yes.
So let me ask you, what is a parenting class?
A parenting class effectively is a group of parents who come together. So it's often a mixture of mums and dads I have, depending on when it's running in day or evening. But it's effectively a group of parents who are coming together because they want to do a better job. I mean, it's as simple as that. Some of them have very challenging situations and others not so challenging. But I think the kind of common thread is that they're not really enjoying parenting that much.
Yeah.
And yes, there is an attitude sometimes with people of just like, you've just got to get through it. And actually what they're saying is, why should we just get through it? Why do we have to endure it? Why can't we enjoy it? And I'd really like to enjoy it and just feel like I'm doing the best job that I can do, because it's the thing I'm the least qualified for, have the least amount of training for, and yet it is arguably the most important job I can do.
It's fair to say that only a tiny proportion of people ever get to a parenting class by numbers.
Absolutely tiny.
I mean, do you have any idea of statistics?
Not off the top of my head, but it changes. The moment you get either a high profile person or a famous person or a royal, for example, talking about the role of parenting, then we see an increase in people attending parenting classes because suddenly it becomes less taboo and more acceptable. There is a general feeling that parenting classes for people in real trouble.
Yeah.
So families in real crisis, and yes, there are parenting classes for those people, but you don't have to be at crisis point to attend a parenting class, but equally you can be.
And in your experience, how did the people that come to your parenting classes find you?
Mainly word of mouth. So mainly they've got friends or family who've either come to my class or attended one of my workshops or heard me speak at a nursery, because I do talks in nurseries and schools and things, so they may have heard me there, or they may have, so they're usually personally recommended, or else sometimes they've just done a Google search. I mean, that's how I came across parenting classes. I just did a Google search.
It's important to say that you got into parenting classes as a result of, or becoming a parenting coach as a result of attending parenting classes with me.
Yes. Well, we did a parent session. We did a couple of parent sessions which are more bespoke. They're kind of one-to-ones. I attended a couple of workshops on things like discipline and boys and how to bring up boys, and then I did a parenting class, and it, because it literally changed my life. I then thought, actually, I want to stay involved in this. I'm not ready to kind of let go. So I became a voluntary assistant. And then I did a training course.
It was completely revolutionary, wasn't it?
Completely.
Do you remember the first time we put Alexander on the naughty step? He was about 3 and you were saying to him, I don't like that.
Yes.
Was he 3?
Yes, this was pre-parenting classes, I have to say.
Pre-parenting classes.
Pre-parenting classes.
But we put him on the naughty. I mean, we just plucked that straight from TV.
Yeah, also at the time that we were kind of embarking on our parenting journey, the TV was packed full of all these programs. Super Nanny, Little Angels, various other kind of, quick fix kind of, things. And there was this idea of the naughty step, which they then evolved and became the thinking step or the thinking chair or the, whatever. But the principle.
Do you remember the first time we put Alexander on there and you said to him, I don't like that.
Yes.
I don't like that. And Alexander replied in this way, I don't like that. Yeah. I don't like that. I don't like that. And I mean, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I was absolutely mortified. I actually left the stair area and went into the kitchen and hid and just left you there, because it almost felt like we'd lost him at 3. I just thought that level of sarcasm was not something I was expecting.
And it's like he was seeing through it even at that age. And there was this idea that you put them on the naughty step for the number of years for a minute for every year of their life, effectively. So a 3-year-old therefore sits there for 3 minutes, with the idea being that they think about their behaviour, and actually he just took the mickey out of us. And then subsequently, when I tried to put him on it, it became a game. The moment my back was turned, he would get off and run.
Yeah,
and
it became a game.
And it was never ever fulfilling its purpose ever.
Now, I have hovered around your parenting classes when you've sort of done them at home, and over the years I've picked up on a couple of sort of what I would call key components of your classes, and when we've talked about them at home, some of these have struck me as really kind of fundamental blocks, like emotion coaching.
Yeah, my favourite.
Tell us about emotion coaching. I mean, to all the people that have had no experience of parenting classes, what would an emotion coaching class look like? Why do you like it? What is it?
Why I like emotion coaching so much is because what it forces you to do as a parent is to look beneath the presenting behaviour, whatever it might be, and look at what is going on emotionally underneath. And it's interesting.
Could you give me an example?
A child coming out of school with a face like thunder and hurling a book bag at you and yelling at you and storming off down the path.
Which we have experienced
many
times.
And it's interesting because when parents come to my parenting class, most of the time what they want to do is jump straight to the misbehaviour class.
Fixing.
To fix I'm just here because he won't do this, she won't do that, she's defiant, he refuses this, or she has tantrums, or whatever it might be. And they find it really frustrating, particularly when they join in week 1, that the misbehaviour class isn't until week 5. And it's in week 5 for a very good reason. Because what we all as parents want to do and as society want to do is want to go straight to the fix that behaviour and everything will be fine. And what emotion coaching does is force you to look beneath the surface and make an emotional connection with your child. And that doesn't mean that you only do emotion coaching when stuff is going really badly. So you practice emotion coaching throughout your relationship with your child. It's just about emotionally making a connection with them and seeing the emotion before you see the behaviour. So
in that example of child coming out of school, face like thunder, throwing book bag down, what's the practice at that point?
Well, I always describe behaviour as like an iceberg, and what we know about icebergs is the majority of them are beneath the surface. And behaviour, what we do is we focus all our attention on the tiny bit that we see at the top, which is the 20% or whatever. And what we do with that is we ignore all the emotion and all the stuff that's driving that behaviour. In that situation, what you would do is you would see that behaviour, you would see that hurling of the book bag, the face like thunder, as red flags. They're your signals that something's not right. And what we do, because we get triggered as parents for all kinds of reasons, and there are so many reasons that we get triggered as parents, but particularly in a public situation, you feel people are looking at you, you feel you have to address that behaviour right away, and you have to get back here, how dare you, don't be so rude, pick your bag, all of that. And actually, because you should see that behaviour as a red flag, what that does is tell you, wow, seriously, you must have had a really bad day. Right. I'm wondering if something has happened, because I know that you don't throw your book bag at me.
Yes. So it's about acceptance at that point of the behaviour and an investigation as to why.
Absolutely. Instead of, how dare you, get back here, pick it up, you're so rude, you're so whatever. Or often what parents do, right, that's it, no sweets, iPad, whatever it might be.
Which only makes the situation worse, because you're effectively denying that child the opportunity to express what's wrong. I've just got to get rid of the cat. I know.
But also, often what will happen...
Carry on, Victoria.
...is that the moment you address the emotion, what you do is you often will just bring it down. So you take the sting out of it.
Right.
Because what happens is that child in that moment can feel understood instead of further attacked. Now,
Yeah. And by so doing, you're effectively taking the sting out of the situation.
Yeah.
And what does that do for the parent, importantly?
Well, what it does is because you're coming at it from a place of understanding rather than anger, it automatically brings your level of stress and your level of being triggered down. Because, and I had this fantastic saying that, and I would say almost everything that I talk about is not original thought. It's stuff I've picked up, it's stuff I've been taught along the way. But Bonnie Harris, who is a brilliant parent coach in America, really simple things. Former actress, and does amazing workshops and stuff. She talks about your child having a problem rather than being a problem. And the moment I think of my child as having a problem rather than being a problem, everything about my way of dealing with them changes. So
it has results.
It has results, because when I see that behaviour as, wow, he's seriously having a problem, rather than, he's being a problem and people are looking at me and now I'm really irritated and angry and all the rest of it. So it brings my levels of stress down. So it means that I'm able to deal with it in a way that's going to be far better. I have never ever screamed or shouted at my child and it's been beneficial. I have never ever done it and thought, well, I'm really glad I did that. That was a great outcome.
I've always regretted it. And I've shouted a lot, haven't I, over the years?
Yeah.
I have. And every time I've had to apologise. Every time, pretty well.
Well, that's brilliant that you can apologise, because a lot
Cats just wants to go out. Sorry.
A lot of parents don't do that. But if I am able to just take my levels of stress down enough, just to not shout, I'm in with a chance.
Shouting has achieved nothing.
No,
it achieves.
But also,
nothing. It's part of button pushing as well. Would you say?
Yeah.
So can I move into button pushing, because is that a class in itself?
Yes, that's a class in itself, and that's not till week 10. But it's a really interesting idea, because button pushing is about what
triggers us.
What triggers us, and why it triggers something in us. And why I might see that behaviour in someone else's child and I'm not bothered about it. Or equally, I may see that behaviour in one of my other children and I'm not bothered about it. But that child doing that thing at that moment really gets me.
What is that about?
Well, that's all to do with parents. And that's why we look at it in my course at the end of the course, because if you started with that, parents would run amok, because they come in, they want to deal with their kids' behaviour.
This is about looking at the parent.
Yeah.
We're looking at the parent and their childhood potentially.
Huge. I mean, there's so much that influences why we parent the way we do, how we get to parent the way that we do, and so much of it is automatic. We don't even think about it. So much is just in us, and a huge amount is to do with the way we were parented. And some parents pay real attention to that, and other parents are completely unaware of it. And the moment you become aware of it, then you're in a better position to take what you want and leave the rest. So very few parents come in and say, there is nothing about my childhood that was good in any way. I wouldn't take a single thing into my parenting. Because there's always something in there that parents can find. But unless you're aware of why you're doing it, you can't change it.
It's the triggers are incredible. My worst one, and I think it's the one that triggers a lot of people, was taking an hour to leave the house getting ready.
Oh, yeah.
Which I know has now become part of stand-up routines amongst comedians.
Yeah, it's very commonplace.
It would drive me crazy.
Yes.
It would actually drive me mad.
Yes.
That idea that it would take 45 minutes to put coats on, boots on, and get out. I honestly would finish me on a Sunday afternoon.
Yes. But the truth is, it is going to take a while, depending on the age of your children and the temperament of your children and all. And
I wonder if I would go back again now, knowing what I know, that I would be more accepting of that situation.
Yeah. But also there are things, it's not as if I would say to parents, well, you know what, you just got to write off 45 minutes and just accept it's going to take 45 minutes. You may be able to get that down to 20 minutes. But there are ways of getting it down to 20 minutes. But it's still always going to be way longer than it is just you leaving the house on your own, or you and I leaving the house together.
And for some parents, there's so many button pushing sort of would you call them behaviours? I don't even...
Yeah. Button pushing behaviours.
Like not responding when called.
Yeah, the being ignored. But I mean, what's really interesting about button pushing is sometimes it can be really specific behaviours, like really specific. So I had one parent once who had this thing about her child making this like throat clearing noise. And it drove her insane. And it was, so sometimes it can be really, really specific. But then you get a lot of sort of generalised ones. So things like defiance is a big thing.
Defiance.
When they won't I can get, he won't do what I ask, or she refuses, or they say no, all of that sort of thing. So that's quite a common one, defiance. What else is it? Being ignored. And they just act like they can't hear you. And the amount of parents I've had who've taken their children for their ears to be tested repeatedly. And there's nothing wrong with their children's hearing at all. They're just choosing to ignore them in that moment. So we get a lot of those things are quite common.
Yeah.
But what's really interesting is often what is behind, what is underneath the button pushing behaviour is different for parents. So although on the surface the thing might be defiance or rudeness.
How much of that relates to the parent's own childhood?
Loads, huge.
Like
huge amounts.
Yeah. If they weren't listened to.
Yes.
Could be a real trigger.
Yes, a real trigger. So actually they have that trigger not just with their children, but also with other people who might not listen to them.
Yes.
But it's easier as parents to take your anger out on your children than it is your work colleagues or maybe other members of your family, because your children are the ones who get it.
Yeah.
So
does it all, I mean, so many of these conversations, and we've jumped around, and this is only supposed to be a brief introduction to parenting classes, what they are, the sort of things you'd learn. Your classes are like normally 10 weeks, aren't they?
Yes.
And they're about how many hours per class?
2 hours.
So you're talking about 20 hours worth of information and knowledge. And we're jumping around, but for the purposes of an introduction to people who may never have even conceived of parenting classes. So much of this comes back to one core sort of element, which is acceptance of the child. Would you say that at the core of so much parenting is that idea?
Yes. I think as parents we have all kinds of expectations. We have huge expectations of ourselves as parents. We have huge expectations of our children. And then we are bombarded with so much stuff of what should be, what they should, so we get sort of milestones when they're babies. They should be doing this by roughly this age and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, God.
And then that just...
How horrible was that?
Well, no, some of them are actually really important because they're to do with physical and mental development and emotional development. So some of them are really important, but the moment they become your stick with which you beat yourself and you beat your child, that's when they're a problem. So, and they put so much pressure on parents sometimes, and you look around and social media is a whole nother thing. I'm so glad that wasn't really so prevalent when my children were much younger, were really little, because you see these perfect lives, you see perfect handwriting and
Instagram
and all of that, and you just
the perfect
and what
lives
it does
on
is
Instagram.
it makes you as a parent feel like you're failing. Then you look at your child and think, well, somehow you're failing.
Yeah.
And so
don't most families feel they're failing?
Yes,
truthfully,
they do. Yeah, I think so. And or
the comparison.
Somebody's struggling, and I just think it's the whole idea of acceptance is doesn't mean if I accept it then I just kind of lower my standards and go, well, my child's never going to learn to write or never going to learn to use their cutlery or get themselves dressed or whatever. But when you just accept
or learn grade 5 violin,
exactly,
or Russian by the age of 7.
Indeed, once you accept where you're at and where your child is at, and you accept the child that you've got, then you're in a much better position to be able to work with them rather than against them. So if you have a really introverted, shy child, there is no point wishing and hoping and trying to make them extrovert and taking them to parties and go, join in, have fun, you will like it. But you know what, that doesn't mean that if you have an introverted, shy child, you never take them to parties, you go, they're always going to hate it. But when you accept what you've got, you then work with what you've got. Yeah. And that's so important. It's the key to everything. Acceptance is the key. And there is this lovely phrase that says, when I am finding, a situation or a person unacceptable, it is because I have no acceptance of the situation or of the person as they are, or as that situation is in that moment. And until I accept the situation exactly as it is and that person exactly as they are, then there is no peace.
I think that's a really good point to finish on, as a very general brushstroke introduction to parenting classes, what they can offer. Thank you, Victoria.
I just want to say with parenting classes, they are really good fun as well. That's what everybody who comes to my classes ends up saying.
They are fun.
I didn't know it was going to be such fun. And because we're all in the same boat.
Yeah. They are hilarious, actually.
And everybody shares stories.
I do hear it's the story. And is it true, Victoria, that I feature in a lot of stories that you tell in your parenting classes?
A few stories. The thing that I do is very much share personal stories of things that I have done good and not so good.
Do you know how I know that? Because when I come in, like when you've got a coffee break, everyone's smiling at me and I'm thinking, what has been said today?
It's all.
I'm just curious. Where am I sort of featuring? Where am I hilariously featuring?
Oh wow. Okay, so there was in my siblings class. So I do a whole class.
Oh, there's a whole class on sibling rivalry.
Well, sibling relationships.
Which is, I think, a brilliant. We're not going to end this. So tell me about me.
Okay, so. And the thing is, you're not unique with this, because lots of parents do this. And when I tell the story, I see the faces of people going, oh God, I've done that. And it's fine to have done that. But there is a different way to do it. So, for example, when we are trying to motivate our children to do something, quite often what we do is particularly with siblings, is we pit them against each other.
Yes.
And given that they are born competing, they come out of the womb competing almost, the moment we pit them against each other, what we do is we put petrol on the fire that's already there. So what you used to do when you were trying to get them up for a bath, because it was just like, I could see by the end of the day you just done.
Oh God!
You were just like
bath and bed.
Just get in the bath.
Dear God, so it's painful. I go into a cold sweat when a Sunday night bath and bed for some reason was.
Well, that's just worse because it's getting ready for the whole Monday thing.
God.
But you used to get them to race each other up the stairs, like who can get in the bath the quickest. And of course, because they're competing and they're boys, and not that girls don't compete, but boys, it's very much a physical competition. And so inevitably, one would end up almost dragging the other one by the throat down the stairs backwards to make sure that they were first.
A full-on fight.
A full-on fight.
Scrap.
And then you would get angry at them because they were fighting.
Yeah, which I instigated.
Yeah.
I basically said...
Without meaning to.
Without meaning to go,
get in a ring and bash it out between you. But it is a very common thing. And then the other thing that you would do is... I would be like getting in love.
Carry on talking, because it's like Hector or other cat.
Cool, calming down bedtime.
Quick, Hector.
And you would come home from work and come upstairs, and because you're so excited to see them, you'd get them like, rah, that's really exciting, tickle, rah. And then you go, right, go to sleep, everyone be in bed. And then you'd get really cross with them because they would be like hyper, they'd be like literally throwing themselves off the walls. And I would say to you, no, you have to keep it calm. We have to keep it calm and quiet now. Because I'd just done this whole like bath time with my soothing bath, and then you'd be like, "Wow, come on!"
No, sibling. It's not called sibling rivalry now.
No, it's just the class is siblings.
Very good class, important class, because so much of that can go wrong in relationships starts there, doesn't it, in childhood?
Yes, the sibling class is fascinating because I come at it from the position of being an only child. So I don't have siblings. I've obviously never had siblings. So it's a really interesting class for me to do, and I've been doing it for years. And obviously I have my own children, and I have two. So I watch the sibling relationship between them, and I've observed sibling relationships around me. But I don't fundamentally get the sibling relationship because I don't have a sibling.
No.
But I do. There's so much research and stuff about birth order and sibling relationships and how they massively impact our kind of life in our adulthood. But what's really interesting is it's a big trigger for a lot of parents. So a lot of parents will be talking about how your own the way you were brought up and your own childhood experiences.
You get those competitive families, don't you?
Well, not only do you get competitive families, but
they like competing all the time.
What you find is that parents' way of dealing with sibling relationships in their own in their families with their own children is so massively influenced by the way they were parented and by the relationship that they have or they have had with their siblings.
So if a core element of parenting is acceptance, another core element would be awareness.
Yes. Yeah.
Awareness of your own childhood.
Yes, and not just your own childhood, awareness of your own stuff. And there is a kind of chart that I always show at the beginning of every parenting class that I do in the 10 weeks, because it's a really good reminder for people, is that there is so much that influences how we parent, and there's so much that influences how our children behave. And actually what you find is the triggers are very similar. So things that influence how I parent will be my own personal stresses, my own physical well-being, how tired I am, how hungry I might be, my outside environment, so my work situation, my friendships, my marriage, all that kind of stuff, as well as how I was parented. And our children have similar things. We all know how children behave when they're tired, when they're hungry, and yet we have the same triggers.
Yeah.
And it's just being aware that at 7 o'clock at night, if I've come home from work and now I've got to put 2 children to bed, my resources are really, really low. And I have to be aware of that so that my tolerance level, I know, will be much, much shorter, and my ability to lose it will be...
Yeah, we lose it, don't we, sometimes?
Because we're all tired, and it's just factoring that in and letting ourselves be aware that that's the situation, so it's not, so we don't automatically think it is them, blaming them.
I have found myself during lockdown becoming more patient. Have you noticed?
Yes,
like
much
I'm
more.
Literally tuning out to the arguments. Whereas before, an argument would happen and I'd want to stamp on it before it exploded. And now I'm like, oh, let it go. And I literally tune out. And that has been a benefit of lockdown for me.
It's a huge thing with
Have
parents.
you noticed with me doing that?
Yeah, because I think otherwise you would literally be...
I'd be losing it every hour.
And actually...
I just shut the doors and just tune out.
Also, the thing is with siblings, and I know this so much of being an only child, is so much of the sibling bickering, and it is mainly bickering, is not only normal, it's hugely beneficial, because that is where
the testing ground,
learn how relationships work.
They learn conflict resolution.
They learn about sharing. They learn about
forgiveness,
living alongside other people,
tolerance,
all of those things. When
admitting you're wrong sometimes.
Exactly.
So if you stamp that on that,
if you don't give them the opportunities to work that stuff out, what you do is actually rob them of the experiences and the opportunity to grow. And when I went to boarding school at 11, having never shared. I mean, I grew up with a single parent as well, so there were literally just 2 people.
Yeah.
And I went off to boarding school, and suddenly, at the age of 11, I'm in a room with 4 or 5 other girls, and it was a rude awakening for me. I had no idea how to share space, things.
You just turn the lights on.
I would get up in the middle of the night and just turn all the lights on, so I wanted to read. It never crossed my mind that I would have to consider other people.
Because you had no siblings.
I had no siblings, so and also I was devastated at arguments. Devastated. It felt like the end of the world to me, because I'd never learned that you could argue, and then deal with it, be over, and move on.
Yeah, we have a fair few rucks
over
often hilarious subjects.
Yes.
Like politics, political subjects.
Yeah, but that whole
idea.
Like
that 3-hour rolling argument on whether the Korean leader was dead or not.
Oh, yes.
I mean, it went on for 3 hours, and normally I would have stamped on that.
No,
Kim Jong Il, and I just let it play out, and I was like, at what point am I going to just stop this argument?
But also, there does come a point where, as a parent, you do have to step in. But the key thing is, as much as possible, stay out of it, because also what happens in sibling relationships is, as a parent, when you interfere, you put yourself, if you think about it as a sort of triangle, you put yourself at the top as a judge.
Yeah.
And you've got a victim and you've got a perpetrator, and you make up your mind without knowing the facts. Pretty soon, who's who in that arrangement? And I do. I always say to parents, the first thing is to just step back and just observe. Just take a few days to observe. And actually, also what happens is we train our children that the best way to get our attention, and this is particularly when they're really little, is to misbehave. because they get loads of attention when they misbehave. And the same with siblings is when they fight and they argue, they get attention from us. But when they get along, we go, think of that, and let them get on with it. And actually, what we should do is flip it round, start to look for the times that they get along, because there will be so many times when they do get along, but they go unnoticed because we don't say anything, we don't pay any attention to that. And actually, in most families, particularly, unless, there are times when the sibling relationship has got really, really bitter and there's a lot of unpacking, and it's never too late to do something about that. But for most parents that I see, what they think is really awful sibling stuff is actually pretty normal, but they're jumping in too soon. And then what we do is we train our children that actually that's the way to get our attention, but also they are unable to deal with it, so because we have to do it for them. And actually what we want to do is make them feel that they have the authority to deal with most things themselves. And so I will often say, there are sort of different levels. If it's, hair being pulled out, blood being drawn, then obviously I will step in.
Things being thrown.
Like
heavy things.
But most of the time,
things being broken.
Most of what you'll see will be level 1 and then level 2. And level 2 is when you get involved. Level 1, I always say to parents, stand back, count to 10 and just listen and see. And most of the time, and then it sort of dies down. Level 2 stuff is when you get involved. But again, it's how you get involved. And you don't go steaming on in there and go, right, what's happened? And then they both yell at you and someone else's fault. What I always do is say, it looks to me like this is getting out of hand. Do you need my help to sort this out? Or can I leave it to you? And sometimes they say, actually, they do need me to help sort it out. And sometimes they don't. And sometimes the way they sort it out is not the way I would sort it out. But that's up to them.
Victoria, I'm going to draw this delightful introduction.
Forever. It is my favourite subject.
It is. You're very good. And I really do refute the idea that there are enough parenting podcasts and videos out there that don't require your voice to be added. Because I do think you are very good at this. And I hope that's been an interesting insight to anyone watching this video. It's something I've been nagging you to do for ages.
This is true.
And I'd like to thank you for this brief encounter.
It's a pleasure. It's my favourite subject. It's the one I've worked the hardest at for 15 years.
And I've thoroughly enjoyed being an interviewer. Have you noticed?
Yes. You love it.
Anyway, thank you very much. I hope that was a useful introduction to parenting classes with Victoria Markou. Thank you. That was really good.
Was it all right?
Yeah.